Olá a todos e sejam bem-vindos a mais um episódio do podcast Facility Management sem mistérios. Meu nome é Thiago Santana e no episódio de hoje nós trazemos mais um convidado de fora do país para dar uma continuidade na nossa série FM of the World. Mas antes de anunciar o nosso convidado de hoje, eu quero falar mais uma vez sobre o nosso parceiro Beer or Coffee. O custo de CAPEX está acabando com o seu orçamento? Este é um desafio para as empresas que não querem abrir mão totalmente de um espaço exclusivo para a sua equipe. O Beer or Coffee te apresenta uma solução, um escritório privativo dentro de um coworking. Pague todas as suas despesas de locação com apenas um boleto. Estruture um espaço privativo com a sua cultura empresarial e tenha acesso a todas as facilidades de um coworking, como uma cozinha compartilhada, cafeterias, salas de reunião, espaços para eventos e muito mais. Encontre um ou mais escritórios privativos para atender às necessidades de toda a sua equipe em localizações estratégicas para o seu negócio. Acesse www.beercoffee.com ou link na descrição para fazer parte do futuro do trabalho. Link que está aqui não só no podcast, mas em todas as nossas mídias de streaming. Muito bem, então para o nosso convidado de hoje, para a gente continuar com a nossa sessão FM of the World, vamos trazer um convidado da Holanda, que possui umas similaridades muito interessantes com o Brasil em relação a aspectos de legislação trabalhista e algumas travas para a flexibilidade do mercado de facilities, mas que na outra ponta tem um dos sistemas educacionais mais avançados do mundo na área de FM e a gente vai falar sobre isso. Então, para continuar com a nossa convidada e recebê-la, eu vou mudar para o inglês e é assim que nós vamos seguir em toda a nossa session. Okay, so to introduce to start our conversation, I have the honor to receive a very special guest, Yvet Brummelhuis. Yvet, welcome to our podcast. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for us. And as I was saying in Portuguese, probably you haven't followed that much. We have you here. We have met before at least 4 or 5 years ago. And you live in Netherlands. So it's a country there where we have a lot of commonalities with our market in terms of legislation, but you have also a very mature educational program around the family, and all those things we will discuss in our program today. So Yvet, for us to start, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your graduation, your experience, and how are you positioned in the FM market in Netherlands?
Sure. So my name is Yvet. As Thiago mentioned, I live in the Netherlands. And for the past 10 years or so, I've been teaching facility management, first at one of the universities here in Holland, within the bachelor and master's degree. In Holland, we actually have dedicated facility management degrees, but we'll get to that later on. So I've been doing that for a while, and then we as my business partner and I started the World of Yes, which you may recognize. We've been doing a lot of work in Brazil, performing training programs all around the world. So we've been doing that for the past 5 years. And this company has recently been sold. It's now in American hands, and we have progressed to other roles. So just recently I have joined a Dutch workplace firm that advises Dutch firms on everything that has to do with workplace. So not just facilities, but also real estate. And I'm in the role of a workplace strategist. So I know pretty much everything about everything that has to do with hybrid working, working after COVID, facility management in that regard, how to deal with it, leadership-wise, etc. So I think we have a lot to talk about today.
Fantastic. Yvet, let's talk a little bit about the market, the landscape of the FM business in Netherlands. In Europe, we have a lot of different levels of maturity when you talk about the models, about how deeply connected the public and the private sector are with the new trends of the FM business. So tell us a little bit about it. Let's start with the private market. How could you define or at least give us some insights about how is the maturity of the FM market in the private sector, first of all, in Netherlands?
So I don't think there's too much of a difference between the private and the public sector in Holland. If we look at the facility market here as a whole, I would say that we're pretty mature. I think it also has to do with the fact that very, very early on in the 90s, we started out with making sure that we have the right educational programs in place. And that has allowed us to really progress within the facility management departments in the different companies that we see. With mature, I mean that many of our facility departments work with outsourced services. So mainly they focus on managing their departments on a more strategical and tactical level, and all other services are outsourced and taken over by external companies. And that we always say that the more mature a department is, the more you are able to focus on strategy and alignment with the core business. I really do believe it becomes easier the more you mature as a facility department, the easier you are able to align with the core business, because you simply just have more focus to do that. And that's what we see in Holland as well. I just wanted to add that we see more and more integrated facility management models. So that means that you only have a strategic facility manager or management team that's really, really small. I would say no more than 10, maybe 15 people, depending on the size of the company. They determine the strategy of the department, and everything else is outsourced. So also the tactical management that you would usually see still with the company itself, but we outsource everything. I think in Holland, the level of outsourcing is over 70%. So that's very high. I think that also says a lot about the maturity of the market here.
It's pretty high when looking from Brazil, the numbers of Brazil. We're talking about a little bit 40% outsourced and 60% is insourced, especially on the public sector. So as you said, the public sector in Netherlands also, there's a lot of outsourcing models in place. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I think more and more so too. I do work with a few municipalities, and you see there that they do have a few operational staff in-house themselves, which might be a bit more common than in the private sector, but still you see a lot of outsourcing, just simply because of the benefits of outsourcing, and also everything I mentioned just now about wanting to have a more strategic focus. I think here in Holland, that's always been our focus, also because we tend to focus a lot on employee experience, user experience. So then if that's your focus, instead of just, fixing operational tasks, then it's easier to think about what the actual end user needs, and how you can strategically organize that.
Okay, so that is something that I learned from Holland and for the Dutch market. One of the challenges, if I can call this way, is about the flexibilization of the labor legislations. That's a problem that we have in Brazil, and we know the most mature markets from an FM perspective. They have a very flexible, rules around the work contracts. How can you employ people to do all different kind of services? In Brazil, it is not that flexible. We are going in this direction, and I remember from my early past in the international market, the Netherlands also have very strict legislations around it. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. I think what you mean is that we have very strict legislation in place in order to protect the employees, definitely the operational employees usually. So what happens is, suppose that I work for Philips, and I hire a CBRE to do my operational services. But then I'm not satisfied with CBRE, and I switch to JLL, and they're taking over my operations. In that case, JLL also has to take over the employees. I think that's the legislation you're referring to. So they want to protect people from having to switch jobs over and over, or potentially even losing their job just because I, as a client, am switching companies. What's difficult about that, obviously employees always have their own say, right? So if they are okay going to another account, they can. But the difficulty about this is that often when you are dissatisfied about a service or a company like CBRE, very big part of that often is the performance of the employees. So if you are switching to a different service provider, but you are stuck with the same employees, it's not necessarily driving up your performance if they do keep doing what they do. So yes, there's legislation in place to protect the employees, which I think is a good thing, but it doesn't necessarily help to improve the performance that you're looking for as a facility manager.
So you have to rely 100% of the management of those people to speed up or to improve your performance, right?
Right, exactly. And that's why we always have something that's called a transition phase. I think that's something that's internationally recognized when you go from one supplier to the other. And you will have to have very strict agreements in place what you are doing in the transition phase in order to either change the behavior of those employees or to support them to do a better job. Sometimes it's not always their fault, if performance is lacking. It can also be that they simply didn't have enough time or didn't have the right instructions. So it's really important to figure out what has been going wrong, and in that transition phase, make sure that these employees are supported to do the work the best they can. And it could be all different sorts of reasons why performance is down. So I would say that's something that everyone should take into account, not only here in Holland.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you are moving more and more into integrated business or integrated facility solutions. But probably some of the contracts were established before these models. How do you solve this potential problem if you have to keep the same people but need to convert or to transform to a new delivery model? You kind of be stuck on how do you do that? How do you solve this problem?
So the biggest change when you move towards an integrated facility management program, if you have been outsourcing before, is the fact that your tactical management layer is also outsourced. So basically, those are people, tactical managers, facility managers usually, that were working with you before that now have to act from a service provider's point of view. So we have had this situation a few years ago at one of the biggest Dutch banks. They outsourced all of their services to CBRE. And basically what happened is that CBRE took over all managers. And obviously then they are going to see, all right, do we need all these positions? Do we need to let people go, etc.? But they took over everyone that was previously at this bank, and they usually then start off with the same model as before. So with these managers doing the same things, and then as time progresses, you will see that you might need different things. You might need less managers or more, or different roles, and you will have a different conversation, obviously, with strategical management. But I would say that's the biggest change, and it takes a lot of guidance. I think it takes a lot of explanation, a lot of support to the employees, because you are basically doing the same job but for a different company, which is strange, right? Sometimes you've been working for the same company for 100 years, so you feel the DNA of that organization that you've been with for so long. So I would say it's maybe even more so a change management aspect than anything else.
And to see the difference about the markets here in Brazil is completely the opposite. If you change for providers, the good practice is also to change people. Otherwise, if you can prove that you have worked for a customer through multiple different providers along the years, from a legal perspective, is like if you were working directly through to the customer. So you can request a link, you can request a contract, you can call it this way, straight to the customer, because they say you cannot just hire the same people over and over and over through outsourcing companies. So completely different.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's a completely different model.
Yes, which in one sense it's good, because as you said, if you are looking for improvement your performance, you have the ability, the transparency, the openness to change teams. But on the bad side, if you have very good employees, you have to be very careful on how you keep them on board, and probably in that there are ways to do that, legal ways to do that, but how to keep the good people without creating a very big problem.
And how is in Brazil with the integrated facility management model? Because we were just talking about how we experienced that in Holland. Is that a thing in Brazil? Do you see that a lot?
That was exactly my next question to you. We have tried integrated solutions for at least 15 years. I remember one of the first contracts, global contracts, when I was working for a multinational company, was on integrated facility services, including cleaning software services, hard services, catering, security. It was a big one. And of course, along all those 15 years, we have faced all kinds of challenges. Solutions that have performed very well, solutions that haven't performed that well. But what we have seen, and that's my question to you, Yvet, recently especially, what we have seen is we moved from a model 15 years ago when we tried these integrated facility services solutions, and we tried to hire some people, some professionals that could look for a very broad aspect of the FM services. Some of that succeed, some of that not, and one of the main reasons is about the educational program, but we'll discuss this later on. And then after the first experience, this model kind of slowed down a little bit. So the companies, okay, we're not that mature to try this model. Let's keep working on separate business, separate pillars and segments. And now what we have seen is we are moving back to these integrated solutions or projects. But what we have seen was, usually you have 3 managers for hard, soft and catering, for example. You choose one that will be in charge of all the solutions and be the contact with the customer. But what usually happens is this general manager, if you can call it this way, they are willing to look for more the pillar that are more used. So if they are a guy from the hard services, they'll keep all the focus on the hard services, and okay, soft services is easier, catering is not that important. On the other hand, is the same. If they are a guy from the catering pillar, hard services, let's go for the other one. And in the end of the day, what we have seen is a dissatisfaction from the final customers, because we are not delivering the ultimate strategy, the ultimate tactical process that we need. And that's my question to you. How you are forming these integrated managers or the lead from these projects in these integrated solutions? What's the profile of these guys?
Well, I think a very important difference here is that in Holland, we've always been very much focused on soft services. So if you are educated here, then I think 80% of what you learn is about soft service delivery. So naturally, all facility managers would focus on that, and hard services are usually service providers that we hire anyways, so that we need to do contract management on or performance management or anything like that. I think the focus here is often on creating a service concept that generally has a lot of soft services in the scope. And with that, I mean that it's the overall user experience of when you walk in. Does someone greet you at the reception desk? Is the reception desk also a service desk? What's the climate like? Can you take a sandwich, or can you even have your groceries delivered at the end of the working day? Is there a gym on site? All those different things. I think we are thinking from a concept point of view where we think about the experience that the employee in this case has throughout the day, and does he or she have everything that he or she needs. And the profile that we would typically see is basically a facility manager that has a lot of experience in sometimes general management, because you have to be capable to manage big teams, and preferably with soft service knowledge, because that's what our service concepts are usually built on. So I think that's very different from what you are explaining.
But I like the concept that you brought to this conversation, if I understand correctly. You are integrated all the services that at the end of the day will provide the better experience for the customers, which is on the table and on the discussions for other organizations. And you are keeping the hard service, the technical service for specialized companies, specialized people. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Because what we see a lot in other countries is that you probably have an HVAC manager or someone that is responsible for all the installations, etc. For us, that's something that should be okay at all times, and it should be handled, but it's not making a difference in somebody's working day. Well, sometimes, when it's very hot outside and the AC isn't working, then you have a problem, obviously. But I hope you understand what I mean. It's all of the other services, all of the extras, all of the things that you can surprise people with. If people are coming in and they don't expect to be welcomed as warmly as we will, or if they don't expect the design or the colors or the art that are included in the building, or if they don't expect to work out at the end of the day at the office, all of those different things. I think that's what really makes a difference in the experience of anyone who walks into a building. And all of the other things should just be okay. We also call it satisfiers versus dissatisfiers. The AC is typically something that's a dissatisfier. You don't even notice if it's working or if it's not working on a regular day. But if it's really hot outside and it's not working, then you're dissatisfied. But you will never be walking in and be like, oh, I'm so glad the AC is working. I'm very satisfied today, right? So we just see that as something basic that needs to be okay at all times.
It's a completely different approach in separate things based on the relevance and the impact that you have in your business from an experience perspective, which, as I said before, is what is on the table, is on the top of the discussions for all the organizations.
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
Because I think it's relevant to add that sometimes facility management is also, well, at least in Holland, is also a different department than the assets department, for example, or the real estate department. And what you would see is that hard services are often also delegated to an assets department or a real estate department. So it wouldn't even be part of the facility management department. So that also makes that you have a very different focus. I'm not sure if you would see the same thing in Brazil.
This is an eternal discussion, and let's explore this a little bit. Whether is positioned at the real estate department or the facility department from this hard service perspective, and I don't have an answer. Depending on the organization, and we have had this discussion here in Brazil, but also globally. I'm a member of this DC267, which is the technical committee that are discussing the ISO standards for facility management globally. And we have faced these discussions over and over. And we have seen some countries where the real estate is not a biggest part of the organization, so they are within the facility business, especially the hard services. But as you said, in some other organizations, some other countries, you have the asset department, which is responsible for the hard services and the general maintenance and the technical aspects of a building or whatever it is, and it's inside the real estate business. So it's an eternal discussion. There is a prevalence in Holland. There's a model that is more common.
I wouldn't say more common, but like you say, it's a discussion here as well. And it really depends on the type of company that you're in. I would say the bigger the company, the bigger the chances that these departments are actually separated. I think that's a statement that we can make, but furthermore, I think it's very much dependent on the type of organization.
Okay, Yvet, let's talk about what you are best at. I know Holland has the most mature educational programs around FM in the whole world. You have bachelor programs, you have master programs, you have all the stuff that a lot of countries, including Brazil, are looking for. So tell us a little bit about these specific aspects from your market, the educational one.
So in Holland, we have, I think it's actually 12 different universities or universities of applied sciences that have facility management degrees.
Did you understand correctly, guys? 12 universities with programs around FM.
That's crazy, right? And I think we do have to explain what a facility management degree is, because what we've seen a lot around the world is that people are following a bachelor in architecture, for example, that takes 2 years, and then 6 months of that they are doing something with facilities, right? But here we actually have a 4-year bachelor degree, and within those 4 years you learn everything that has to do with facility management. Again, that's mostly on the soft services side and also on the management side. We really train people to become a manager. So we explain to them not only how facility management works, what it is, the different services that are typically part of the FM department, but also how to structure teams, how to deal with different setups of facility departments. Because if you are having all of your services in-house, that requires different management styles than if you have an IFM model, right? So we really prepare those kids for a management role. So not only on whatever they have to know about facilities, but also their management skills and how they are able to lead a team as soon as they graduate. So we have that, and then we have a 2 years master's degree that follows up on that, and it's a bit more, it's just a bit of a higher level, more strategic. I think that speaks for itself.
So Yvet, you just said you have bachelor degrees, 4-year program, guys. Can you hear that? 4-year program, training, educating people to become FM facility managers. And you also said that this is not a complementary from the engineering, administration, or architecture, which is what we are looking for from a starting point. My question to you is, you started from the very first beginning as a bachelor degree, or do you also pace it from, okay, let's start as an extension and then we move from the bachelor degree? And first question, how does this start? As a bachelor degree from the very first beginning?
Yeah, it's always been a bachelor degree from the 90s, I think. So this type of career has been established for over 30 years now. And it's always been a bachelor program. In the beginning, it had a very different name. It's very Dutch. I'm not even sure what the English translation is. But later on, it was modernized to facility management. But the program has been around for 30 years now.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge. So, what kind of professionals those bachelor degrees they graduate? What are their facility managers? What are the fields where they work after they are graduated?
Right. So if they get their degree, they are a facility manager by degree. What we often see as kind of a starting position is Well, I actually have a few new colleagues myself now that started as junior consultants. So they are consultants in the workplace field, which obviously facility management is a big part of. But we also see a lot of students that have graduated that are going into facility coordinator roles, both for service providers or for clients. I think that's a very common one. Or an assistant facility management role, for example. And I think the beauty of these programs is that you are working on a graduation project. And here in Holland, we value practical experience a lot. So from those 4 years, you will do 2 or 3 internships. So max 1.5 years of internships that you are actually already just working in the field. And so you also do that for your graduation project. So many kids, they start working for the company they've been graduating with because they've been around for 6 months. They know the company, they know the things that the company wants to work on or is struggling with. They know how they can add to that with their skills. So the job opportunities are huge. We're really fighting over over those students that are graduating to see who we can hire, because there's only so much of them, even though we have, now I shouldn't lie, but I think it's more than 1,000 people graduating each year, and we all want them. So they are bound to have a job after they graduate.
It's huge. 1,000 people graduated in the FM per year. And Yvet, there's a market outside Holland for those guys as well?
Yeah, definitely. That's what we've been doing with my company, The World of Yes, for these past years. It no longer exists, as I explained, but because many countries and many companies recognize the role of the Dutch in the facility management market, it's very nice for Dutch people to work abroad and use their knowledge to help companies all over the world. So our employees have been all over the world, and it's nice to bring a different perspective. I feel it would be the same as someone from Brazil coming here, or just us talking today. I think it gives a different perspective, right? So if you can bring that to the table, and plus you have all that knowledge that is often lacking in other countries, I think that's when you can really help each other to grow and to progress within the organization. So we do see students that are going abroad also for their internships, by the way. So maybe more for their internships than after they graduate, because going away for a few years is something else than just doing an internship for 6 months at a lovely location. But definitely, I think they can work anywhere.
And there's a lot of recognition about the value of those programs. If you guys that are listening to this podcast, look for Euro FM websites and communications. You can see that yearly they have a lot of awards focused on the students, a lot of programs of recognitions from the universities. So it's a big business, a big thing that Europe as a whole, the way they look for these graduating programs. Yvet, for us to finish our interview, what has been great, of course, we'll have other sessions like that. If you could say one thing special about your market, your job in Holland, for the guys that are listening to Brazil, and maybe they become, okay, let's try to move to there and see if I can fit to this market. What could be? What will have this special in Holland that our guys could, that's interesting?
Well, the thing that I love about our job here is that we really think about the whole concept of the employee experience. We really look at the type of work that employees are performing and how we can adjust the workplace to that. So not just facility management, but the whole workplace. Also using colors to positively influence their mood, their productivity, their brain activity, using different designs to enable them to do the work that they are doing the best way possible. So if there's anyone that wants to learn more about thinking about the workplace as a whole instead of just arranging lunch or just arranging DAC, for example, or just thinking in those pillars, I think is the right word. We are trying to let go of that, and I really, really love that we are trying to do that and making sure that we are creating the workplaces of the future.
And I could say that I have witnessed a lot of interesting programs, interesting studies about how colors, how perfumes, how a lot of things that you can design in your environment, you can influence the productivity, you can influence the way that people interact in the work according to what you want to achieve. Yvette, thank you so much for your participation in your podcast. Para vocês que estão nos ouvindo, não esqueça de curtir e compartilhar o conteúdo desse episódio. Se você estiver pelo YouTube, não esqueça de inscrever e ligar o sininho para receber as notificações dos próximos programas. E fique atento que semana que vem tem mais Facility Management sem mistérios para vocês. Um grande abraço e até a próxima.